everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. This video is being shot on the 3rd of July. I'm doing this because then it weirdly makes the light better. But I'm sure it's not going to upload till tomorrow, July 4th. So let me just wish everybody a happy Independence Day. And let me say that I wish somebody at Prime would look up some facts before sending out an Independence Day message, because the United States did not exist when we declared our independence, when Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. We were not United States. We didn't that place did not exist. But and also, let me say this about, stop pimping veterans, okay? The people that took the most risk, and by the way, the revolution had already started in April of 1775, right? Like there was already armed conflict when Jefferson writes the Declaration of Independence and all those men got together and signed it in Philadelphia. But, the people that were taking the most amount of risk were the signers. What they did is they committed treason against the king. That was punishable by death. If a guy was out there shooting at British soldiers and he surrendered or he just ran away, then that was that, right? Like his consequence might not be as severe. But all these guys that signed were wealthy. They were leaders in the community. They had to go into hiding until the war was decided. So, stop with the veteran crap, okay? It's a holiday for everybody. We have one Veterans Day. That should be plenty. So anyway, this is going to probably upload on the 4th of July. Now, the 4th of July, a lot of historic things have happened on the 4th of July, besides the Declaration of Independence being essentially promulgated. Because it was probably signed earlier. Like, it took a while for everybody's signature to get on there anyway. Things didn't happen that fast. But some other interesting things that happened on this day, July 4th, that is, in American history. Vicksburg fell. I mentioned that the other day. The fall of Vicksburg, when the Confederates finally surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant's forces, was probably it was a more significant event ultimately than the Battle of Gettysburg. The Battle of Gettysburg just meant that the Confederates basically were never going to try to invade the North again. That was their second foray into the North. The first one was the Antietam, that ended at Antietam. They would never come back north of the Mason-Dixon line again. So that was important from a tactical standpoint. But from a strategic standpoint, getting the Confederates to surrender Vicksburg. Vicksburg was the last holdout and last redoubt on the Mississippi River. And because of how it commanded the river, the Union Navy the U.S. Navy could not get up and down the river. But what was really important about opening up the Mississippi River was that places in the upper Midwest, so, think Illinois, Missouri, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, all of the products that those states produced. So in some instances, certainly, like food things, like they grew corn, but there was also coal mining in those states. There was in northern part, like up in Minnesota, Wisconsin, there was ore mining, right, to make steel, and all that stuff. Corn and wheat and whatever they were growing, livestock. So like they would put live cattle and live hogs onto these barges that plied the Mississippi River. All of that stuff could now move via water, which was way more efficient, and it could get stuff to East Coast ports much easier than any other method at the time. The railroads were in existence, but they weren't really they didn't transport the huge amount of cargo that they do today, or even that they would, say, 10 years later, after the Civil War. So it was important to get Vicksburg in Union hands, and Grant got that done on July 4th, and it was a big deal. Something else that interesting, I think this is just one of those interesting historical notes. 3 U.S. presidents have died on July 4th. 2 of them you may know pretty well because it's a pretty widely known story, and that is John Adams, the 2nd president, and Thomas Jefferson, the 3rd president. Both died on July 4th, and they both died on the exact same July 4th, which was 1826, which incidentally was exactly 50 years to the day after the Declaration of Independence was promulgated. The other president, interestingly, that died that day is James Monroe. Now, James Monroe was the 5th president. Madison, of course, was the 4th, James Madison. Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, all Virginians, as was George Washington. But the interesting thing about that is that Monroe dies in 1831, so 5 years after Jefferson and Adams die. Now, there is another presidential death kind of connected to July 4th, although it's not a great connection, but I'll mention it. So in 1850, Zachary Taylor hosts a barbecue at the White House, or a cookout, or a dinner, or whatever. I don't know what it was. I don't know if I would have called it a barbecue back then. But anyway, apparently, according to legend or biographers or whatever, he enjoyed a helping of cherries and milk, and that's the terminology they used. I don't know if they thought of milk the way we think of milk. It might have meant like cherries and cream, because you've heard people eat peaches and cream or strawberries and cream or whatever. But anyway, it's assumed that he got sick from that and died a few days later. Now, let me say this. I don't know that he died of food poisoning. Or now he may have died of indigestion, because you can die of indigestion. But in any event, it was attributed to the cherries and milk as the reason he died, and he had consumed that on July 4th. So that's the other presidential connection, I guess. Okay, so somebody asked me a question about little background. So somebody reached out to, or made a comment on Lyle's over at No Hippie Trucking and Transportation on his YouTube channel, or they reached out to him some other way, and it doesn't really matter how they got in contact with him or how he found this out. But basically what the deal was is that this person was on somebody's truck as a trainee, and they said that the trainer decided that he was going to go home for 2 weeks. And what ended up happening is the trainee was not getting paid for that time. And he's just sitting at home with nothing to do but bills to pay. And my response was, he should have been getting paid by one of 2 parties, either by the truck, and Prime pays all the taxes and just nets it out of the truck's revenue, or by Prime itself. But either way, the guy should have been getting paid. And I don't know why it is that he wasn't. Because typically if a trainee is, like available for dispatch, then they're supposed to get paid either by Prime or by the trainer, by the truck, unless it's not, unless it's a company truck. Then in that case, Prime would be paying them all the time. But what I said too was that in a comment to Lyle's video where he talked about this, I said, that guy should have applied for unemployment. And Lyle said, hey, why don't you talk about that? So let me talk about what happens when you're supposed to be employed, but you're not. And I want to be careful here, because unemployment law is technically based on state law. There is federal unemployment insurance and payments that are made, but it's all based on state eligibility. And let me go back a ways to when I had a trainee on my truck, and that trainee got off the truck because they were finished with their 30,000 miles. And then I think actually I let them off the truck in California, and they went to some family member's house, but they don't live in Southern Cal. And then they eventually went home. So they took a little bit of time off. But then they said to the fleet manager, my fleet manager, who was also their fleet manager and still is, hey, I'm ready to go back on the road. Let me know when I can get a truck. And then this was around the time that there was like a shortage of trucks, but there was still a lot of loads and stuff like that. And and I kept checking in. I was like, hey, what's going on? Did you get a truck? Have you heard anything? Did they tell you to go to Salt Lake City or whatever? And, the answer kept being no, and they couldn't get a hold of the fleet manager. And I finally, they were like, hey, I'm not starving here, but I don't like going all this time without a paycheck. And so finally what I said to them is, look, right this second, you are an employee of Prime who has essentially been laid off, and they're waiting for something. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, new business. Like if a company lays people off, it could be for any number of reasons. It could be that like automakers have laid people off when they didn't have the parts to make the automobiles. Other industries lay people off when they don't have the raw materials to make the products that they sell, right? Well, in this case, Prime, even though they didn't say they laid this person off, was essentially laying them off because they don't have the thing that this person needs, a truck, to do their job. And they were not yet, they lease, but they were not yet an independent contractor with Prime. And Prime was like, oh, you're waiting to upgrade? Well, just wait. Well, the thing is, that's not really okay. Because even if a company doesn't say that you are laid off, right? You don't get a pink slip necessarily. But even if they don't say that, there's still certain ways under the law that you can be construed as being laid off and or terminated. Now this is not with cause, right? It can't be termination with cause. But if a company quits paying you, okay, that's a pretty good indicator. If they quit giving you hours, okay, and that's happened where companies have said, hey, like during the pandemic, there were like Marriott hotels, they were like, hey, we're not laying anybody off, but and then they'd put the work schedule out and the person would have like 0 hours, right? So it's like, what's the difference? You said I'm not laid off, but I'm not making any money. And what they were trying to do is get people to quit, because if you quit, right? If you quit, you're not eligible for unemployment insurance. But if you're laid off or terminated without cause, you are. But so what happens is when they just quit paying you, or they cut your hours to zero, even if they don't say anything to you, you're still constructively, and that's a legal term of art, you're constructively terminated, right? Now, they can call you back. Laid off people get called back all the time, right? It happens. So what I said to this former trainee of mine, hey, you've been waiting around for like it was quite a while, right? And I said, I'd file for unemployment. And I think right after that, they did get a truck. So they didn't do that, but they could have, because here's the thing. And let's talk about the guy who's the trainee, right? He's getting a salary from one of two places. He's getting a salary either from the truck, which usually is, somebody has an LLC, or he's getting a salary from Prime. But either way, he is clearly an employee. He's a W-2 employee. But if you quit paying somebody, right, that's a constructive termination. And almost anybody would look at it that way. And you can file for unemployment. Now, let's say that the dude only does take 2 weeks off. Okay, fine. You're still entitled. You can get unemployment for 2 weeks, right? All you do is you meet the requirements of your state. Like maybe they say, oh, you got to apply for some jobs, and you report in, and you report every week. And if after 2 weeks you're like, oh, I got my old job back, you just tell the state. Don't lie to them. Don't keep collecting benefits when you're back on the truck and getting paid. You just say, hey, I got called back. And they'll say, okay. And even if they haven't even started paying you, they will give you money for that 2 weeks. Now, I know it doesn't help out in the short term, but what I say to people is the second you're not getting paid, file a claim. Because what happens if the dude that's your trainer, right, he's like, yeah, I'm taking a couple of weeks off, right? And then he decides, and this happened to a person that I took on my truck for a short period of time because they needed to finish training. But what if they say, oh, yeah, I decided to stay home another week? Well, now you're 3 weeks into it. Or what if after 2 weeks, the guy's like, you know what, I decided I don't want to keep training. They'll get you another trainer. Well, guess what? Prime is not going to go back and pay you that 2 weeks that you're owed by somebody, right? And so file for unemployment. It's easy to cancel, like once you say, oh yeah, I'm back to work, I'm making money. But there's no reason to go without pay. You're stopping everything you're doing and making yourself available to ride on that truck. You're honoring your obligation to Prime. Because here's the thing, if you quit, if let's say the shoe is on the other foot and you quit, Prime's gonna be like, hey, you owe us that $44,000, whatever it is, $4,400 for your school because you quit before you had a year done. Okay, that's fine. Then if you didn't quit, then somebody better be paying you every week until you're either, they better be paying you every week, somebody better, until you accept a contract to be an independent contractor. But if you're you're going through TNT and then say you go to company, somebody better be paying you the whole time, right? And with company, maybe you got to run, or you know what I'm saying, right? You know how you make money in the trucking industry. But my point is, if you're sitting at home waiting for a truck, now this isn't like my truck's broken, I'm sitting at home waiting for it to get fixed. That's a different kettle of fish. But if you were just like came off a trainer's truck and you're waiting to quote upgrade, somebody better be paying you. And it shouldn't be your trainer, right? The trainer did their job. Now it's on the company to get you a set of wheels for yourself. But same thing, if the trainer takes time off, somebody's got to be paying the trainee, right? There's no reason to put your life on hold for free. You better be getting some compensation for it. So You know, if you have any questions about this, go to the state you live in. Go to the unemployment, because that's the other thing. The money that you're getting paid, I guarantee taxes are being taken out and unemployment insurance is being paid, because I see it when I have a trainee on the truck. I know for a fact. That's why I told my trainee, or my person that had been a trainee, apply for unemployment. I paid the insurance for you for the last however many months that you were on the truck. Take it. You know, it's not fair when that happens to people. So anyway, I hope this empowers somebody. I hope, you know, at least check into it with your state and tell them what's going on. Say, hey, I work for this trucking company. They sent me home. They haven't told me when I'm coming back, and nobody's paying me. I feel like I'm laid off, you know? So anyway, take care. Have a good 4th, and be safe. Don't blow any digits or toes or anything off. And I'll talk to you soon.